The person who reacts is innocently responding to a perceived threat to their existence. So I'm going to start with a little rap that I wrote, but I'm going to share it in spoken word. So you've just been diagnosed and you're feeling relief. You can finally label all your pain and your grief. You're wondering what's wrong. Now you can know. No longer a mystery why these symptoms won't go, but what you do from here will make the greatest impact, spiral down further, or set you on the right path. When you're stuck on a label, life can throw you for a loop. You'll grow tired of a system that keeps you from the truth. And welcome to episode number 4 of Trigger Proof. My name is Dr. Nima Rahmany, and this show is dedicated to helping you take responsibility for your triggers to responsibility so that you can have a healthier connection with yourself, thereby rippling out and having more fulfilling relationships and a deeper connection to purpose so your work can be fulfilling. This show is specifically for people who are struggling in relationship limbo, divorce, separation, breakup, or career limbo related to a disconnection from purpose. I help people reconnect to themselves through their nervous system so that they can be better in their family life. They can be more calmer, less anxious, less tense, dissolving that imposter syndrome, and then really serving humanity with it. We're going to be talking today about the dark passenger. If you haven't seen episode 1, 2, and 3, please do so. It's on YouTube. They're being downloaded on YouTube and edited. Really, it's an important conversation because we're talking specifically about transforming our triggers into lessons and using relationships instead of the hell that they can be. We use them as spiritual practice so that we can become better, more rounded, more empathetic, heart-centered, mission-driven individuals. I really invite you to ask questions. If any ahas come up, please let me know in the comment section. If you have any questions, you never know, this could drive a topic. Please engage with me. Let me know what's been relevant for you so that we could actually keep this conversation going. It's a very important conversation about consciousness. This show is really designed to getting you from unconscious, reactive, to unfuckwithable. Because why is that important? Because if you're like most people and myself, you are really governed by externals, whether that means criticism makes you run the other way, or you are so addicted to support and praise and validation that you've completely lost sight of who you are. And when you show up in the world that way, you're not heart-centered, there's no authenticity, there's no vulnerability, you're putting on a mask and you're pretty much pretending the entire time. We're going to talk a lot about that in today's episode, how to really take off that mask and really learn how to dance with the shadow self. Because if you looked at the first couple of episodes, the way that I explained that we help people guide them from unconscious, really reactive and fearful about what other people think, disconnected from themselves, breakdown in relationship limbo, to feeling completely centered, aligned, mission-driven, and unfuckwithable, pardon my French. The way that we do that is through the intimacy upgrade. Episode number 2, we talked about nervous system regulation. And what that basically means is you want to dissolve the tiger attack. You want to un-F your nervous system, which basically means if your nervous system is not regulated, then you are going to be reactive. You're easily triggered. Everything around you will trigger. One of my clients used the term, I feel like a jellyfish, constantly being pulled by externals. Well, when your nervous system is effed up, you're highly reactive and you're not resilient to the external world. You can't sleep at night, your body starts to break down. The conversation that I had earlier, the little rap song that I talked about, was the diagnosis. It's called the diagnosis trap. Many of my patients, I'm a chiropractor, so many of my patients that would come in with stress-related problems, I would find really challenging, because I found that a lot of their physical health problems that they would come in with was tied into old, past, unresolved victim stories, and bad things have happened in the past, and in that moment we have a victim and we have a perpetrator. However, 3 months later, 5 months later, 1 year later, 10 years later, if you're still identifying with that victim story, your body starts to break down and you start developing illnesses. And I started noticing this in my patients, seeing that almost everyone with a chronic health issue had an old victim story that they are identifying with. So that after we regulate the nervous system, the next stage of transforming this volatility, these triggers, this limbo state in your relationship, not knowing whether you should stay or you should go, the next part, it's important that you get complete with your past. And complete meaning, and we talked about this last time, I had you make a list of all of the incompletes, the people who you are afraid to bump into because you're playing a victim to them when you're not able to see the innocence of the situation and really have a big picture perspective of how the interactions actually served you. And if that's difficult for you to do, don't worry, you're not alone. It's just that you haven't had somebody show you really powerful methodologies of changing the story. And that's really what the second most important part in this intimacy upgrade that you're called on to do to become trigger proof is. Now, when you get complete with your past and your nervous system is regulated, what happens is you start to feel more present. You start to feel more grounded. Some of the clients that we work with, they say things like, oh my goodness, I just feel like I'm in my body and I'm present. I see you have some questions there. Feeling guilty, we're going to talk a little bit about that. That's a good question there. We'll talk about that. But when you actually get complete with your past and your nervous system is regulated, you'll start noticing that you feel a lot more present in your body. You're a lot more calm. When you make eye contact, you're actually able to make eye contact with other people rather than being in your head all the time. These things, these past, if you don't really clear them and properly clear them and then reinforce them consistently, they spill into your present and into your future. Today we're going to be talking about dancing with your dark passenger. Then the next part is learning empathic communication, because whether you stay or you leave this relationship, it's important for you to learn how to, number one, first empathize with yourself, which is your first big hurdle in the journey, and then number two, empathize with the other players in the game. The most difficult thing for you to do, for me to do when I'm playing victim to you, is to actually see your innocence and see the human being behind it. See, if I victimize myself towards you and I feel that you've done me wrong, immediately I now give you power, and I've lost, number one, I've dissociated from myself and my power, assuming that basically that person has power and I don't, not really owning and seeing where your power actually was, even if you were victimized by somebody. It's 100% of the time when we work with people and they have a story of an old story of abuse or trauma, their story of the past is, I'm not worthy or I'm powerless. And your work in order to heal is to see where you actually had power, where you thought that you didn't, and it will surprise the crap out of you when you look, when you have the right goggles helping you get there. So once you have actually learned how to empathically connect with yourself, you can then see the innocence of that person who you've been playing victim to for so long. You actually see that they were a wounded child, they were fearful, and you have empathy towards them. And I truly believe that empathy is the greatest healer. First, empathizing towards yourself, because chances are your old traumas have caused dissociation. But secondly, empathizing with that other person. And so that was one of the key components that I've really seen came out of the darkness into the light from my own experiences. I've been able to help people who are stuck in that relationship limbo, who are separated and are trying to find meaning or trying to find out why. And how it happened was when I got my client to empathize with the wounds of the partner that they are so resentful towards. They've taken them off the pedestal, seen their innocence, and that's assisted in their healing. So that's why, when we're going to talk about empathic communication next week, because it's critical. The last part is, it's not easy to do this alone. You need to be committed, and you have to have a community around you that is calling you on to your greater version. Because if you're repeating your poor me victim story to friends, and they're promoting the idea that you had no responsibility in the entire thing, then they're doing you a disservice. You are giving away your power, and studies have shown that your victim story actually blocks you from healing. This is a story and a journey of healing. I, as a chiropractor, have been helping people heal from physical wounds for the last 18 years, and I had to leave that profession full-time, because I'm still doing it part-time, because I realized that it's their emotional wounds. It's your emotional wounds that you're still carrying with, that you carry into your relationships, and they keep bumping up against those wounds, and without a careful observation and a unpacking and a transforming, then you're always going to be looking for somebody outside of you to heal that wound, where it's 100% your responsibility. And it's not, it didn't start with you, we're going to talk about that in a moment, but it can end with you, and it's your responsibility, not just for yourself, but for your future generations, for your kids, for your sons and daughters, so that the inherited cycles of family trauma and abuse and neglect and abandonment and attachment wounds don't keep getting promoted from generation to generation. And a funny thing happens when you do this right. Not only do you transform yourself and feel a deeper sense of confidence and self-love, but you actually then transform your parents as well, and can heal past generations, especially if they're still alive, because they feel empathized with. Everybody feels a lack of empathy. So on the other side of this work, what I've discovered, because I had to create this myself after going through a huge trauma last year, a toxic relationship breakdown, was it's made me probably the most empathetic human being that I've ever become. And I have a long ways to go, and I'm a work in progress. However, I now see and feel people completely differently simply by going through this process. Today, we're really going to delve into your dark passenger, part of you that is constantly in fear, the part of you that is trying to protect you, the part of you, that little whisper in your brain that says, you're not enough, you're not worthy, you're not good enough, you're not lovable, you're broken, nobody cares about you. You know, that little voice that runs constantly. Now, here's the thing that I've noticed for most people who are reaching out for help with relationship limbo or career limbo, divorce, separation, where they've completely lost their confidence in themselves. The one thing that they have in common is they all have this deep desire to be able to look in a mirror and say, I love you. Okay? Take a moment and ask yourself that question. Do I have an ability to look in a mirror and say, I love you? This is the #1 question, where it's a good indicator. It's good to evaluate, to give yourself an audit of how you're doing with this dance with your dark passenger. To look in a mirror and say, I love you. To feel confident and to actually feel chill and comfortable in your own skin. We all want that. Why do we want that is very simple, because that relationship and your ability to do that is the foundation of every single other relationship that you have with your partner, with a lover, even with your kids. If you're not, let me give you an example. If you're not able to say, I love you to yourself, what'll happen, and you're a mother or a father, what'll happen is you will do everything you can to use your kids to give that to you when you're not able to give it to yourself. How many of you know what I'm talking about? Let me know in the comment section if you can relate to that from a parent of yours, or you actually catch yourself red-handed doing that if you're a mom or a dad. I don't love myself, so I'm going to use my kids to give that to me when I can't give it to myself. And that's a symptom. And the thing is that it's not your fault if this is what's happening. This is complete unconsciousness. I want to show you where it actually comes from, and then give you some tools of how to overcome that so you can actually feel confident and comfortable in your skin. You can be in a state of outflow rather than neediness, getting into codependent relationships. Because that's the thing, if you don't get this part right, your chances of getting into a codependent relationship, which is, I need your approval and I'm gonna hide the truth of who I am, because if I tell you the truth of who I am, then you're not gonna love me, you're gonna leave me, and I'm gonna be abandoned. So I'm gonna put on a mask and pretend so that you can stay with me because I'm terrified of being by myself. That is the hallmark of codependency. And when you don't really align with all of this, your chances of creating a codependent relationship like I was in myself, I had to go through it all myself. My mess is my message, so that I can actually see, that's where I didn't have it right. And so that's why I created the intimacy upgrade, so that you can actually create relationships that are based on consciousness, not based on you fill my unmet attachment needs. And if you don't get it right, which you never can, it's never going to be enough, then it's your fault, you're the one to blame, you're the villain, and all of that is an illusion if you really take on this level of work. So it's important to you to be able to get this relationship with yourself, because it's the foundation not only of your relationships, but I forgot to actually say, it's the foundation of your success in business and worthiness. Like if I don't feel worthy and deserving, then I'm not, when I don't feel worthy of abundance coming to me, because I have this feeling that I'm a piece of crap and I don't deserve it. And so these are all like subconscious programming that we're going to get into. And the part that kind of blew my mind the most, and the reason why I'm talking about this, like what right, you're a chiropractor, Nima, what the heck right do you have to actually talking about these psychological conditions? You're not qualified to. Check this out. When patients would come to me with these chronic health problems, and I got to know them and we would start to create these life skills workshops, it turned out that every single one of them had the exact same problem. They didn't know who they were with respect to the universe, and they weren't able to look in a mirror and say, I love you. So when I went upstream for all these chronic problems, it all went back to that, and it blew my mind. And I said, I couldn't stay in the office any longer. I have to leave and teach this. And so it's been very rewarding and fulfilling. When you get it right, magical things happen. There's a client who just jumped in and started working with us and was terrified of investing in his higher self. Terrified of that, but he overcame his fears and actually jumped in and started this process of work. And he was in a place where he was traveling for work for like a year, and just before he came back, his wife said, I don't want to be with you anymore. I think we should split up. And so now for 15 years, his 15-year marriage, where he spent his whole life codepending and basing his whole sense of fulfillment on her approval, now he basically was facing the fact that she didn't want to be with him anymore, and in that capacity, and it was like a huge identity crisis. He's like, I don't know who I am anymore. But when he jumped in and he started taking on this work, he moved back, and it's only been a couple of weeks. It's only been about 4 or 5 weeks, and he basically said, even though I'm now in a divorce proceedings and we're working towards separating, I feel more connected and more alive within myself than I have in the last 5 years. And this is happening through the transitional anxiety of an actual separation. Consider the possibility that the transition you're going through, if you actually get this right, you have an upgraded version of yourself through it, rather than the downgraded version, which you've all seen people who don't take on this work, who don't upgrade themselves, invest in themselves with time, effort, energy, resources, upgrade themselves, they downward spiral. So I'm committed to helping people through their transitional anxiety of relationship, career, to up level so that they're an upgraded version of themselves than they were before, and it's possible through this work. We know what it is that we want to say, I love you, when we look in a mirror. Want to feel confident in our skin, because it's the foundation of all our relationships. So what's in the way? It was last year when I was in probably the worst time of my life after my breakdown. It was a toxic relationship breakdown. We both were two little children colliding with one another, both with our own version of abandonment wounds. Let me know if you can relate to this. The abandonment wound that I had of my previous kind of abandonment story that I was kind of living with in my body and my mind was that when I feel abandonment, I cut and run. My partner, when she felt abandonment, it was the exact opposite. Insecurities came and it was terrified of abandonment. So when you have two people with unresolved attachment wounds that are completely unconscious, and you approximate and you bring up each other's attachment wounds, if you don't approach it from a conscious perspective, what happens is there is a highly volatile, explosive type of scenario. Add in sexual addiction and a deep, like, up and down passionate relationship, and now you have a recipe for intoxicatingness and toxicity. So I like to joke, it was just as toxic as it was intoxicating. Let me know if you can relate to that, because it took this huge breakdown. The gift of the breakdown was that I can actually look at all of this and ask myself this question. This dark passenger, this ego part of me that constantly feels that I have to prove myself, that I'm not enough, that's about ego, pride, and greed, that's about external validation and approval, that deep inherent feeling inside of me that feels that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, and I have something to prove, and I need to be seen and heard by everyone outside of me, and all this attention, and I need all this praise and validation to cover up for the fact that I don't love myself. Why is it that I feel that way? Number one. Number two, when I talk to my clients and every one of them come in with the same thing, why is it that this is a universal problem? Why is it that every single time that I'm talking to somebody, they're coming in with the exact same challenge? They're coming in with this feeling of unworthiness, this feeling of not good enough, and that's like their primal fear that's pretty much running all of their breakdowns unconsciously. Where? Why? So I did some digging, and what I discovered was pretty crazy. So, number one, it didn't start with you. This feeling of unworthiness, of why don't I love myself? Really, I want you to ask yourself this question: why is it that I don't love myself? Well, it didn't start with you. Basically, I have this list of things, and I want you to let me know if you can actually relate to any of this, okay? And please tag somebody or share this with somebody that you know really needs to hear this, okay? Because this is all happening unconsciously. It was happening with me completely unconsciously until I had a toxic breakdown that forced me to wake up, to look and go, where does this come from? And holy crap, this didn't start with me. So pre-birth conflict, we're talking about intergenerational trauma. They've done research on mice and shown that they are living at the effect of past stresses, past generational traumas. Through epigenetics and through genes, it basically keeps getting expressed and passed down from generations. So if you had historical family trauma, which my partner did completely, and so did I, we came into it, you didn't have a chance from the beginning. This then causes the psyche kind of passed down from generation of unworthiness, unlovability. That's where it begins. Now, check in utero. When you are in utero, do a little quick check-in. When you were in utero, what was the current state, what was the state of affairs with your parents at the time? Was there a fear there? Was there a really stable family unit? Or was there a great deal of conflict and a great deal of like fear and uncertainty? Was your mother basically going, okay, I just got pregnant, I don't know if this guy's gonna be around? And so that lack of an invitation to exist, in utero stress, that your mother and father, the dynamics with the family dynamics in your family while you are in utero will cause an unconscious downloading of a feeling of unworthiness. Nothing to do with you, not your fault at all. However, this is an unconscious patterning that's downloaded that you might not even be aware of, but it's there. Next part, birth trauma. James Hollis, who's a Jungian psychologist, basically says that all trauma is separation. All trauma is a separation trauma starting from our primal separation, from birth, from the womb, which is a primal trauma from which we never fully recover. And that separation will be another feeling of, I'm not safe, I'm not getting my needs met. So the child all of a sudden then has this belief and perception that they're not going to get their needs met. And there it is again, and there's the fear. That's a very primal fear. So if you had birth trauma, check in. If you had any birth trauma, even worse birth trauma, if you're going to notice that, there's another reason why you're dark passenger, this little shadow part of you that says you're not worthy. There's another evidence for it. Next part is if you had any separation from your family. See, the child is very narcissistic. We make everything mean whatever about us. So when there is like a divorce, in the family, when there's a breakdown or you're witness to abuse and conflict in the family with your parents conflicting with one another, your parents and your siblings, you with your siblings, what you're going to do is you're going to actually make it mean that you're not good enough and you're not worthy and you're not lovable. That's what children do. Children make everything mean something about them. It's constantly a projection of themselves. So family conflict, sexual experiences in childhood, the confusion that can happen if it's with a family member or a neighbor. This is so common, and what happens is here's more evidence. See, notice, you're literally gathering and collecting evidence throughout your entire life and before that you're not lovable, you're not worthy of love, your sexual experiences, then you have childhood traumas, physical injuries, emotional injuries, abuse, neglect. This is a very big thing. Parents with addictions problems, the breakdown. You didn't stand a chance. Your ego was basically in the driver's seat from the beginning, constantly in a state of fear of unlovability. My needs aren't going to be met. I'm not worthy. Childhood trauma, conflict with teachers. Now you get in school and then you get schoolyard conflict. Maybe you were bullied. Maybe you were ostracized or humiliated, or all of a sudden you were called upon. Some of our clients, we regress them back to earlier scenes. They're in the 5th grade doing a speech. They pee themselves. Boom, everybody starts laughing. Boom, these are little evidences that we're gathering in our minds of our unworthiness and lack of lovability and how we're a fraud and we're nothing and we're a piece of shit and you name it. It's all there. It's very powerful and very strong. Then we have then you start getting into your teens. You get into relationship conflict, heartbreak in high school, on and on and on, and each one of them are little emotional injuries that lend you to believe that you're not worthy of love. And then you get into work conflict. Some of our clients come in because of a massive breakdown with work, court cases, getting fired from jobs. And so now, by the time you're in your mid-20s, you have gathered and collected generations, years, decades, hundreds of years of evidence of your unworthiness. And so if we don't learn and do the consciousness work to be able to really connect with that and clear all of those past stories, not just cognitively, but also in our nervous systems and in our bodies, and take that little child here. How do you do it? You connect with that little child and that toddler in each of these steps, and what you do is you reparent, which is the conscious connection of that child and giving them the attachment needs in your mind and in your heart and energetically. Mark Wallin of Family Constellation Therapy says at least a minimum of 6 times a day. What does that look like? Well, it looks like you connecting with that little child. What I recommend you do, basically what I have most of my clients do, this is, can you see it right there? Right there. That is a 6-year-old version of myself, and every time I'm looking at it, I'm reparenting, which means connecting with that little boy or little girl. Now, when you first do this, consider the possibility that that little boy or little girl does not want to have anything to do with you because they're so not trusting. Sidebar here. If you told me last year that I would actually be talking about the wounded inner child and connecting with him, I would have thought you were pretty crazy. But what I've discovered, when you get this right and you actually give them all of the affirmation and the love and the connection and the empathy, the exact same way you would for your own kid who's having like a physical injury or an emotional injury or is pouting or is saying, "Get away from me," where you know that they really want the attention. Your job is to give your little boy or little girl the exact same consideration than you would like your own child. Okay? So the child, the inner child within you, which is part of your ego, your shadow, it's all kind of interrelated, is to reestablish a connection with him or her. And consistently, 5-6 times a day, connect to breath, connect to body, and give that little boy and little girl all of the validation and affirmation that he or she was looking for externally, that it didn't get its attachment needs met, that because of that has now projected a future life constantly needing it from other people. Everywhere. I need it from other people because I haven't been able to give it to myself. Well, guess what? This is what self-love is. When everything turned to crap for me last year and I did things that I felt absolutely ashamed of, I thought to an extreme amount of guilt and shame. I thought to myself, how is it possible for me to love myself if I became that? And the work that you do, and I'm gonna say this is very important for you to get this, the way that you love yourself, because I had to know, how do you love yourself? Because I love myself. Like, come on, oh Nima, you have to love yourself. I was like, come on, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what does that really look like practically? I discovered the access point was that little guy. When I saw what I became when things would get volatile and things would get violent between the two of us, and our two little boys and little girls where I was trying to get away and she was having her attachment needs totally triggered and didn't want me to go, and it was maybe you've seen yourself in that situation, and I just needed my space, and I wouldn't get what I wanted, and she wasn't getting what we wanted, and it became toxic and volatile. And I would look at myself and go, wow, I got triggered. What the hell did I become? I had to deal with all of that toxic shame. What I discovered was the access point to it is to not see yourself as the monster that you turned into, but see the innocence of that little boy or little girl who was reacting out of a threat. See, what's really important for you to understand is that the person who reacts, whether it's that other person outside of you or it's actually you, is innocently responding to a perceived threat to their existence. And that's what you do in a toxic relationship, a toxically unconscious relationship. Now, when you start to do this work and connect to what you're thinking in each moment and becoming aware of all of those I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy of love voices, and turning them towards what you actually are wanting, changing the story from all of those past events, reconnecting to those people that you were disconnected from, and really finding your power in there and learning how to dance with your dark passenger. When you finally get that, you have an integrated whole. You realize that, yeah, sometimes I can be a narcissist. When I'm in ego, there's two sides to me. When I'm in ego and get triggered and I'm in a state of fear, I completely go into self-preservation. Some people, they freeze and then they cut away and they run. Other people, they go to fight and they go into attack mode. So the way that you overcome the guilt and the shame, which was one of the questions that was just asked, is to have the ability to see the innocence of yourself in that moment, to see that how you are reacting and responding wasn't actually the real you. It was the unconscious version of you, and your partner was unconscious as well. And the way that you heal is you first empathize with yourself in that scene, in those environments, and then you do the same for your partner. Because if you hold on to your own victim story and you can empathize with you, but you're not able to do that for the other person, you are now stuck and disempowered. It feels good because you can avoid responsibility, you can blame the other person, you can dominate and avoid being dominated. The problem is those payoffs of this complaint is costing you your health, your freedom, your humor, your power, and your sense of aliveness and well-being and your vitality. That's what's possible for you when you actually get connected with it. Connecting with that little girl or little boy that's gone through all of those things and reparenting and changing the script and getting into the body and repeating again and again and again slowly fills the cracks in the floorboard. And as a result, a level of self-confidence that you haven't felt before. A level of, here's the greatest gift of all, what I wanted to say is when you learn how to dance with your dark passenger and your nervous system is regulated, the result is something that we all have been searching for, and that is authenticity. Authenticity is your ability to just be integrated with your light and your shadow. Your dark passenger, that little evil part of you, the saint and the sinner part of you, and say, I'm both sides. I am light and I'm dark. And I see the innocence of it all, because my life is an instrument for something greater, using this mess to become my message. On the other side of that is being able to take off the mask. Why is that important to you? Well, because of all of these past traumas and experiences that you've been gathering and collecting evidence for your lack of worthiness and lovability, what ends up happening is that you then have to ask yourself, okay, who do I become right now in this environment, at work, in my relationship, with my kids? Who do I have to be? And the answer to that is anybody that's necessary to get my needs met. So what happens is you put on a mask. So I put on this mask so that I can be a certain way in this environment so that I can get my needs met. And there's a complete unconscious inauthenticity towards that. Can you relate to that? That you just feel like, I don't know who I am. I don't know who my real self is. I feel like I'm pretending all the time. This is why. This is exactly why, because in order to get your needs met as a child, you realized that who you were was causing conflict. And that conflict was having you feel like you're not worthy. So who do you have to be? Any damn thing that I need to be in order to get my needs met. So with me, the way that that showed up was I became very entertaining. I became a chiropractor so that I can really be important to you, so that you would never leave me and that you would always feel that I'm important to you. And then after that, that wasn't enough. It wasn't successful enough and I wasn't making a big enough impact. So I learned these masterful tools of transforming stress into your power so that I can then be even more important to you. Not only was I helping make a difference for other people, which is my altruistic side, my higher self, but my lower self, narcissistic side, made myself very important to you. How did I show up in my relationships with women was because I dealt with a separation from family trauma at the age of 2, where I didn't know where my mother left. She came from Iran to Canada with my twin brother to explore immigration, and I felt I was not going to get my needs met. I became extremely good at being entertaining and getting people's attention. In my light, I use that attention and that superpower to be able to serve other people. But when my dark passenger is in the driver's seat and is running the show, it comes off as needy, attention-seeking, and manipulative. And either way is part of my personality and character, depending on my level of conscious awareness. So this work allows me, what I just shared with you, allows us the opportunity to actually be authentic with ourselves and say, listen, I've learned to dance with my dark passenger. I have a light, I have a dark, I'm here for a purpose, and I'm going to use all of my superpowers to the advantage of both myself and the world so that we can carry forward an advancing civilization. That's the secret, is integrating your dark passenger, owning it, and then using it to serve others. What happens when you get this right? Well, I'd like to introduce you to somebody who came to me at a very difficult time going through this relationship limbo, wanting to help fix things at home. And we got to work over the 3 or 4 months of just dedicating to really going into learning how to dance with the dark passenger. And what came through on the other side is a more confident, badass entrepreneur. I'm just gonna let you meet her for yourself. I just wanna test and see if these work. Let's see, her name is Kira, and I wanna introduce you. Kira, can you hear me?
Hi, I can hear you.
Oh, perfect, I got my headset on. It is great to see. What time is it over there?
It is 20 to 6 in the morning.
Holy crap, and Kira's been with us this entire time. Kira, I just want to tell you, like, I have a confession to make. Kira's from Australia, as you can tell. When you first reached out to me and I checked you out on social media, my impression of you was like, oh my gosh, this girl is pretty little Barbie. You know, I had these preconceived ideas based on externals, so I'm calling myself out on that. And I was like, oh, she's this pretty perfect, she's like Little Miss Perfect, and she's really just gonna be all, you know, surface level. But what I discovered when you really took on this work, a level of vulnerability and authenticity, somebody that actually have really, it's very rare for me to see that. And to see your transformation go from that place of where you were back in October to what you're doing now, I wanted to acknowledge you and say, like, hats off to you, and like, this is amazing. Thank you for proving how powerful you can be when you just really dedicate yourself to owning and completing this. So I wanted to ask you, based on what we just talked about, where were you before taking on this, and what have you noticed about yourself and your impact and your ability to lead? And as a mother, where were you before and where are you now?
I think it was interesting actually, because when I came to Canada and did your course, I have suffered with self-worth challenges and the inability to love myself for basically 36 of my 37 years of life, which is a really long time not to love yourself. And
you didn't know that at the time, did you?
Right. Well, I have done a lot of personal development, and every time I would go in search of that complete love of myself, I knew that that was a gap in me stepping into my potential and being everything that I could be to make the impact that I want to make. You know, and especially with the women that I work with, if I can't love myself, then how can I serve them and help them to step into that for themselves? So I couldn't find the missing link. Everything that I've done has added value to my life, but in that area I was still searching. So yeah, it's presented many challenges in my life, and I guess I didn't understand why. What was it? And I knew that I'd lost my voice over the years. I'd become very shy, and I created all these stories about myself, which I knew were not who I was when I was a child, as a very confident, outgoing child. So I guess the gap that I discovered when I came to Canada, I mean, all women have the worthiness challenges of, am I enough in terms of physical appearance? I'm sure we can all relate to that.
Men too.
Right.
They have it too. Not just you. It's not,
no.
You don't have the monopoly on that.
Yeah. So, but what I discovered was the story was I'm too much. And so over the past 20 years of my life, because I was so outspoken and so outgoing and you know, loved school, loved life when I was younger, it was actually not the children around me, it was more so the adults really dulled that down. And I associated success with pain and disconnection. So I then spent the next 20 years of my life not trying to be good at anything, not stepping into my greatness, not using my potential, not using my voice. And the lack of authenticity that you share, you know, most of my friends had no idea who I was, because I was so quiet around them. I remember one of my dear friends saying to me, something came up around the dinner table about being funny, and I would describe myself as funny. And he looked at me and he said, "You're not funny." And that was a moment in my life where I realized my friends have no idea who I am, because I'm not authentic in their space, because I'm scared of being too much. I'm scared of being judged. I'm scared of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong. I was scared of my power, essentially.
And how do you show up in relationships with that thing going on over your head?
It's that lack of it. When you're not authentic, there's a disconnection there, and it's hard to really create deep, connected relationships when you're not truly being
intimacy.
Absolutely. And when you're scared of being everything that you are because you're not embracing that dark passenger side, then you're constantly holding your energy back, and that flows into every area of your life.
Totally. So this mask and this inauthenticity basically runs the show, and you walk around saying, okay, who really am I?
Because and you're walking on eggshells. I felt like I was constantly in my head, which causes disconnection, judging and managing everything I was going to say before I said it. And it's like being trapped. Like, I have a freedom now that I've never experienced before. I feel so light and so free. Whereas before it was like I was screaming on the inside. If you're listening to Kira and you can relate to her, please let us know. I mean, this is like an epidemic, what you're talking about. This is like universal. It's so powerful because we were walking around on eggshells, very easily triggered. And we're so scared to death of external criticism, and we're so pulled towards external validation that we actually, in the fear of one, in the pursuit of others, we lose ourselves. And then we wonder why our relationships don't actually thrive,
right? And so what I wanted to acknowledge for you, because I had to learn these tools through a relationship breakdown as well, the gift of the breakdown. What I wanted to acknowledge for you is you're proving what's actually possible, because to separate when you have children is very challenging, and to have a business that you're running together, you're constantly going to be met with challenges. Like, it's an ongoing process. The work is never done. Your partner or your ex-partner's job sometimes is to trigger you, it seems, right? If you can relate to that. I don't know if you can relate, but this is how it works sometimes. But if you know the tools to take each of those emotional injuries that come up, because rejection is one of them, betrayal, sense of feeling of betrayal is another, it's going to come up, and it's real, especially in the limbo phase of that uncoupling that happens, which is quite traumatic. To go back to the tools to be able to love yourself. You know, that's the hallmark of this. This one here is to un-F your nervous system. This one here is to stop playing victim and to get complete, which is what we did as well. We kind of got you going back and looking at what was that like for you, looking back on your old relationships that were out of integrity, and what was the impact of getting complete for that for you?
Yeah, I think it's, we tie so much of our worthiness into our relationships because we don't give it to ourselves. We're seeking it and holding others accountable for it. And even, you know, going through that separation, I think when I first met you, there was such a great risk, or what was happening was I was tying my worthiness into that. And so to be able to walk away feeling complete and loving myself and not needing that from anyone else in my life or in my past is, as I said, the most freeing, empowering space to be in. And therefore, when I move forward into my future, there's no, and even, you know, starting to date and do those things, if for the first time in my life, I'm able to just be me, and I have absolutely zero care whether that is what that person in front of me is looking for, because I feel complete and I love me. And that's just the most incredible gift ever. I'm excited for the future because I know what I bring now. I know it's just going to be a different energy. There's no expectation that would be placed on that next person coming into my life.
Kira, you just really inspired me just with what you said, and it's an honor to be part of this you know, empowering women. I truly believe, you know, when you look at a relationship with two people, any area of life you don't empower, the other person will overpower you. In other words, there's no victims. And what you stand for is empowering women, and this work is about empowering women, because I know what it's like to be in a relationship where the empowerment kind of balance wasn't there, and that contributes to the volatility. So the work that you're doing and helping empower women in their businesses, and I'm on your team, by the way, and what I would love to do is to help give women freedom and choice, and which is great for men as well, so that men, we can then step up and resource ourselves so that we don't become codependent on women for our approval. We can become more empathetic, less narcissistic, less ego-driven, and really more heart-centered human beings, because we were never taught. And this is a, you know, toxic masculine, toxic feminine game of each person taking responsibility for themselves, and you've taken responsibility for yourself, and now an entire tribe of people all around the world are benefiting from it. See, it's not just about you and your kids. I'm just so proud of you, and so I want people listening to really see, like, what opens up for you if you're in this limbo state, or you're going through a divorce or separation and you don't see possibility. You just see downward spiral. You see everything going in the shithole, which is your ego and your dark passenger speaking, and you don't actually take the time and really dedicate all of your resources into healing those emotional injuries that happen. What Kira's done is, separation is a trauma, and it's kind of like a back injury from chiropractic perspective. You can you hurt your back and you can kind of like walk it off, but you have that little misalignment and it's gonna start decaying. And what Kira did was she recognized that this is a very challenging time. And she says, I'm gonna start doing the treatments on it, which is all self-love treatments, completing with past treatments, nervous system regulation treatments, learning empathic communication to self and other, clearing those past old wounds and inner child type of work and resourcing herself. So that imagine if you take that on in 3 months' time, 4 months' time, being actually better than you were pre-injury. That is the hallmark of it, because what I'm seeing from you right now, and when I look at you and I feel your energy, you're actually better now than you were like a couple months before everything broke down. Can you not see that? Yeah, and
I felt really empowered. I had found my voice and, you know, was kicking butt in my business before this, but this is just a whole nother level. It's a whole nother level of freedom and confidence and you know, especially moving forward as an independent mum, which, by the way, was the greatest fear I had in life, was that. So I have now faced my greatest fear.
Because I'm not worthy if I'm an independent mom.
Yeah. And the two big gifts, I think, is that when you move through a separation, there's so much to lose. You know, we have 2 young girls who are watching this unfold, who are basing their own worthiness and having their own perceptions. And not only that, we managed a big company together, which is my future. So there was just so much on the line to lose that there wasn't time to be unresourceful for 12 months or 2 years and cause damage to these things that were really important to them. Exactly. So sometimes our why isn't even ourselves. It's the things around us that we want to make sure we don't impact in a negative way.
A rising tide lifts all boats, Kira. And so what I'm just seeing from your share is that as you're going through this difficult time, you're resourcing yourself because you know that the kids are going to have to adapt and you want to be there for them to make sure that they get their attachment needs met. Otherwise, you're in your head all the time and you're dissociated from yourself and them, which if you look back in your life, if you're listening and you're watching right now and you saw your mother and father go through challenge, or you saw them go through a breakup or a divorce or some sort of a trauma, your mother and father weren't doing very well. They were dissociated, so you had no connection to them, so you didn't get your attachment needs met. And that's how the cycle of abuse and trauma continues through generation. And what you're doing now is you're basically stopping that cycle.
Yeah, and that's a priority for me. And I can honestly say I feel like I'm showing up so much more like as a better mother and being so much more present with them. And yeah, it's been a huge gift. And the other thing I just wanted to share is, you know, everything that you're sharing is exactly what we went through. And you can I could have either had the stories, the beliefs, and the focus on, but we could have made it work, and if only this, and, you know, and had more pain and suffering. Or I can just step into taking responsibility for my contribution to the things that you shared, my past traumas that contributed, my need to be heard and validated, which was my trigger.
Amen.
I can't control what the other person does. I can only control myself. I can only heal myself. And to take responsibility, to see, you know, and you could have the stories of, if only I could go back 12 years and show up how I know now.
This way. I wish, where was this 5 years ago? Damn it. It would have saved me a whole bunch of suffering.
Totally. And I'm excited. I'm actually excited for the future because I know this stuff now, and I can create, you know, I think we set a scene in our relationship that was very hard to change. And I'm excited to start fresh, knowing what I know now, knowing where I screwed up. And that's all that I can focus on. The rest I can't control. And that's very freeing, to own your own crap, to love yourself, to embrace that shadow and who you were, and have empathy.
Kira, something tells me, I don't know, I could be wrong here, but something tells me you're not going to have a problem finding dates. I don't know. I have no idea. I could be wrong here. Just a hunch. I'm good at these little premonitions. I don't think you're going to have a problem. So I wanted to say thank you. I look forward to working more with you. We're coming to Australia later this year, and we're going to partner up and create some massive possibilities for the community down there, because we want to create empowered people, not just men, not just women, but empowered families, so that we can break the cycle of intergenerational trauma, have people more regulated and trigger proof, which doesn't mean trigger less. It just means, as you said, Kira, responsible. So thank you for joining us. And I really look forward to just more connection and contribution to the people that you serve as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, that was beautiful. She makes me cry quite a bit because one of the things that I love to do is just to look at the journey that everybody's been on. We are starting to wind down. Let me know if you have any questions. I see some questions and some comments here. Please let me know if there are any questions. Hey, Trevor says, you have a totally different energy from when I met you at the Overview Experience back in October. Doing the work. Yes, thanks, brother. I love you, Mr. Trevor. Before we sign off, there's somebody that I'd love for you to meet. Many of you have met her before. She was one of my first clients when I left chiropractic and I started doing this work. So it's been interesting, total coincidence. This is Kim, and Kim was one of my first clients after chiropractic. She reached out to me because she was struggling in bed with crippling anxiety, and she had a tough time trusting people. And her story of transformation is quite inspiring. Many of you have met her. Anybody who reaches out to chat with me, she's the one who does our intimacy audit. So if you wanna have us look at your case a little bit closer, you would talk to Kim first. Many of you have already spoken to her before. Today, as according to Facebook, what's today?
3 years.
Today is Kim and I's 3-year friendship anniversary. It just happened today, so I was like, to celebrate that, I just want to introduce you to Kim. Kim, I would love, you share your story quite a bit with anybody who reaches out. So can you share where you were before you started taking on this work and where you are now in comparison?
Before I met you,
yeah,
I had struggled with anxiety. My first anxiety attack showed up around 17 years of age and then was just part of my life from the age of 18 or 19 on. And it was manageable. And I did everything that I could think of to do to help fix it, make it better.
Medication,
doctors, psychologists, therapists, counselors, the internet. I had hundreds of bookmarks of cures or promises of cures because nothing was working, so I kept researching and looking. It just kept getting worse. And I was starting to get really scared because I thought, this is getting worse, it's not getting better. I was on the best medicine, on the highest dose, and at the worst, at the height of the anxiety.
And that anxiety stopped you from actually being able to participate in your children's lives. What did you miss out on because of this?
So many things. I missed out on birthday parties, family dinners. Probably the hardest was my daughter Jess was getting married and went wedding dress shopping, and every mom's dream is to go wedding dress shopping with their daughter. And I was laying in bed, and thankfully my sister Jen was taking pictures of my daughter and sending them to me in dresses. And I was laying in my bed crying, thinking, this is my life now. There's no hope, there's nothing left for me.
So you took a chance, you saw me on, I was working with a nutritionist at the time. You were working on your thyroid.
Yep.
And you saw a post or something, and what did you think initially? Did you think I was awesome right away?
Once I got past the fact that I knew you were an egotistical jerk, my feeling was I was desperate and I needed hope, so I was willing to just be like, I know he's an egotistical jerk, but I think he has the answer that I need. So I'll give him a chance.
What?
I'll give him a chance. And I think our first conversation, I said, okay, I don't trust you. I'm not sure I'm crazy about you, but I'm out of hope.
So what happened after we started to put these to the test?
Everything changed. After our first conversation, I remember I got off the phone and I thought, what did that guy do to me? What happened? Something's different. I'm a real skeptic, and I had been in bed literally constant fear. If I was awake, I was afraid. Of what? I don't know. Before that call, I was in bed. After that call, I started noticing I wanted to get out of bed. I wasn't in constant fear all the time. That just continued, and noticing that I was improving as weeks went by.
Yeah. What we did, just in case you're wondering, was we took a past event that she was so hung up on, causing her to believe that she was powerless and unworthy, and she completely saw it from a different perspective, and we use the overview method on it, which we do in live trainings, and we show people how to do that for themselves so that they can shift their perceptions. And then all of a sudden you were able to do what that you weren't able to do before?
Get on a plane.
That was like your first thing, your biggest fear was getting on a plane.
I had not flown since well before 9/11. And once 9/11 happened, I thought, that's it, never again, there's no way. And the next thing I knew, I not only was booking a flight, which would have been unthinkable for me to even try to open a computer to book a flight, I was literally on a plane and I wasn't having anxiety.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So fast forward to today, when people reach out and they are struggling with relationship limbo, career, or they're feeling this relational anxiety and they want, you know, to get through it. They reach out to talk to us and they get to meet this lovely young lady. You now get to share your story and it actually helps transform people. And so what is the big message that you have going from where you were in the dark to now actually seeing evidence each and every day, going through challenges still, there's no end to challenges, but going through them with new tools? What would you say to somebody who's like stuck in limbo and they don't really, they feel like there's no hope and they've tried everything and they've done meditations and retreats and affirmations and all of this stuff and they still feel kind of stuck? What would you say to them?
There's that thing inside of you, despite the fact that you feel you've lost hope or you think there's no more hope because you think you've tried everything, there's still that thing inside of you that's pushing you to move forward. You're afraid, and I know that feeling. Keep listening to that feeling, keep following it, because it's there for a purpose. And it's pushing you to move forward. It's pushing you to keep trying something new. No matter how scary it is, I was afraid to talk to him.
Me?
But I knew that I was worth it. I was worth it. I was meant to have not just a manageable life, but a beautiful life. And I was determined to get that. Not just for me, but for my 4 kids, for my family, for my friends, for my sisters, my dad, you know, everyone. I wanted that freedom from the constant fear that I was living in. So I was willing to fight for it, for myself. No one else was going to be able to do it for me. I had to fight for myself. And that's what my message would be to anyone else. Fight for yourself, because you are so worth it. You're here for a purpose. You're not on this earth by accident. Your life has meaning.
Happy 3-year anniversary. Now she's basically our community manager and she's an advocate for the work, and her life is an example, and it's an honor to work with you.
Thanks.
Be on the same team. High five, girl.
Thank you.
So that was it. Thank you for your participation in the show. I love your comments. Please, please, please share this. 2 things. Share this with people on your timeline. Tag people that you know really need to hear this. And if you want for us to take a closer look and do an intimacy audit, send a private message and chat with Kim and see exactly where this is relevant for you, the authenticity, get understanding of yourself and other, a deeper sense of presence, because at the end of the day, what we want is a deeper connection to love of ourselves and love of other people, and complete with our past. Thank you for joining us and thank you for your comments. Every single Wednesday, join us next week at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, and whatever time that is, Saturday morning or Thursday morning for you Aussies and Kiwis. We are grateful that you're joining us, and thanks for your participation. God bless.